Good morning, Hamlet Nation. Today, on April 8th, 2018, I'm here with Guditus as well as Kyle Burke, and we will be discussing Hamlet.
We will be discussing the theme of truth in Hamlet, specifically the relationship between guilt and truth, and we will also be addressing the question of how can you be sure someone is guilty without a direct confession.
A topic in pop culture today that's relevant to the relationship between truth and guilt is the O.J. Simpson incident, in which he was accused of, but never convicted, of killing his wife and her boyfriend.
Yes, I recall that incident. Such a tragedy. Another idea of the inability to believe is often through our government. For example, most people like to believe that the moon landing was staged and that we did not actually land a human being on the moon.
Those are both excellent examples. Another great example is global warming. Many people typically allege that the science behind global warming has been invented for ideological or financial reasons.
After a quick word from our sponsor, we will be back and resume our discussion about Hamlet and his internal conflict throughout the play.
Howdy folks, this is me, Colonel Sanders. For $5 you can fill up your car with gasoline, or you can fill up yourself with my $5 fill up with finger-licking good sauce. It's tender, it's juicy, it's delicious. 3 chicken tenders, taters, and gravy. I throw in a biscuit and a big old cookie. My $5 fill up will fill you up, guaranteed. And that right, Philip? It's still finger-licking good.
Welcome back. Our resident expert Kyle Burke is here to share his insight into Hamlet.
Thank you, Trevor. Hamlet first faces uncertainty when he sees the ghost of his dad. Initially, he has to think whether the ghost is real or fake, and if it is real, should he take its advice about killing Claudius. Then after, he is faced with more conflict about killing Claudius himself.
Hamlet is internally conflicted because he believes that Claudius had something to do with his father's death. However, he's not 100% sure. So, to get the truth, he acts insane and then later in the play stages his own play to find out if Claudius is guilty or not.
I believe the play that itself is a lie, because in a play you are acting, you're not being yourself, along with the fact that plays are often fictional and not based on real occurrences in life.
Absolutely. Polonius says, by indirections find directions out, meaning you need to use lies to get at the truth sometimes.
Also from that play, we find the guilt in our story. Claudius, upon seeing the play that Hamlet performs, feels guilty and is visually troubled. Later in the story, Claudius professes his guilt, but however, only the audience sees it. Claudius's visual distress upon seeing the play confirms Hamlet's suspicions that he had some role in his father's death.
Later, when Hamlet has an easy opportunity to kill Claudius, who is praying, he chooses not to, because he feels that Claudius would not go straight to hell and instead of heaven, because he is praying. Since Hamlet feels that Claudius deserves to be in hell instead of heaven, he deals with his internal conflict and possibly feels the weight of the potential guilt of not fulfilling his father's dream of avenging his death properly.
Hamlet's decision to not kill Claudius when he is praying deeply shows how much he truly wants Claudius to suffer and does not want anything good to come of the rest of his life.
An interesting subject when talking about guilt in Hamlet is Ophelia and the role she plays. She's used by Polonius and Claudius and Hamlet, all for the same end goal of finding out the truth about one another. Some may argue that Ophelia felt guilty for her involvement in the plots against Hamlet, so she killed herself by drowning in a river. Her guilt is deeply rooted in her actions and responses to Hamlet's advances later in the play after she cuts him off at Polonius's request.
Ophelia's predicament is an excellent example of how guilt affects the conscience and can destroy lives, as Ophelia ended up committing suicide.
Another character that dies as a result of guilt is Laertes. Laertes fights Hamlet to try in an attempt to avenge Ophelia's death and show that he truly did love Ophelia more than Hamlet did. Claudius used Laertes as a revenge motive on Hamlet, and because Claudius's guilt reigned so deeply in Hamlet, it ended up in the death of Laertes and Hamlet and himself. This podcast is brought to you in part by Fortnite. Fortnite is a competitive game between 100 players as they airdrop out of a moving plane or battle bus. These players fight to survive as the play space slowly shrinks to force people into combat. The only weapon that you begin the game with is a pickaxe, and you find weapons throughout the map. Outlast your opponents and download Fortnite today.
The play uses many soliloquies to portray characters' thoughts and feelings. Through these thoughts and feelings, the audience is exposed to truth and guilt. The truth and guilt expands the story's plot. Claudius's soliloquy in Act 3, Scene 3 exposes his guilt in killing old Hamlet and taking his throne and his wife. Hamlet's soliloquy exposes his thoughts and feelings when he asks to be or not to be, because he is contemplating life or death and action or inaction, whether to act on Claudius's guilt or wait to see if it is true or not.
And to conclude today's podcast, we will return to the current events that we addressed at the podcast beginning. In the case of O.J. Simpson, we could clearly see the impact that guilt has on one's actions. For example, one could believe that the guilt that O.J. felt led him to go on to that car chase, which put many lives in danger. Furthermore, O.J. wrote a book about what he would do if he committed the murder. One could also say that the reason he wrote that book was due to his guilt and try to clear his conscience.
The idea that the moon landing may have been faked has created a deep-rooted distrust in the American government. In today's society, people do not believe anything that the president says and need to see factual evidence in order to believe anything. There's also rumors of fake news being spread, which has to deal with people's portrayal of the news and the facts that are presented. News companies often twist the news in order to fit a certain ideal that they are trying to portray to the American people. This has led to a wild inaccuracy in news across the globe. Thank you all for listening to our podcast. Special thanks goes out to our producer, Sam Stevens. Unfortunately, this is our final podcast ever, so hope you enjoyed it.